In part 1 of How to Watch Movies in the 21st Century, I examined how using career context will help you determine what movies deserve your attention while also empowering you to avoid all discourse surrounding a movie before you see it. Let's jump further back in time to continue this exploration in part 2. Film history is trickier to go in cold. Many classics have earned reputations for being essential or foundational. They're endlessly referenced, written, and talked about. This is not a negative. This opens up a new avenue for context that I'm calling the original source.
12 anni fa, quando io e te siamo venuti qui, hai detto la stessa cosa.
What directors, styles, or films influence the films you like?
La detesto, ma devo pure adeguarmi, che ci vuoi fare?
You can take this back and forth from watching modern directors' movies and then discovering how their style developed and then watching those movies.
Claudia, ci sposiamo?
Cosa ti rispondo? No.
Don't say that, it's too painful.
What do you want me to say?
This is an adventure.
There are countless ways to learn about a filmmaker's influences. Director commentaries are probably the most robust way, but a favorite of mine is the Criterion Closet videos.
미디엄 쿨은 제가 옛날에 DVD를 가지고 있었는데 박찬욱 감독님이 이걸 빌려가서 먹어버렸어요.
Growing up a DVD head, there are few things more pleasing to me than watching filmmakers look at DVDs and Blu-rays and talk about them.
Don't Look Now is genuinely in my top 10 of all time. It's a big influence on me because I like to do lots of kind of foreshadowing and omens of like doom.
Joe Safdie was telling me that this is a brilliant film.
A remarkable outcome of these Criterion Closet videos is when filmmakers I admire speak about how they used specific scenes from other movies for scenes in their movies. It's freeing to hear this. I mean, in other words, who did they steal from? Recently, in a particularly exciting episode, the Safdie Brothers spoke about Nicholas Roeg's Walkabout.
There's a sequence in Good Time that was very much inspired. Ronnie was just like, there's a sequence in Walkabout where, you know, there's a hyper fast montage of scientists in the middle of the desert. And he was, when we wanted to do the police montage, he's like, he showed me, he was like, we gotta do this the way that this deals with the scientists at work.
Now, I watched Walkabout and could not specifically pick up on what the Safdies used for Good Time, but that's the beauty of references. They get filtered through your own sensibilities and become your own style. The original source is particularly exciting when it comes from a master filmmaker. In a recent DGA interview, Martin Scorsese...
Scorsese.
Sassi, baby. Martin Scorsese told Quentin Tarantino about a specific Hitchcock insert he loves. Here's Martin. There's one shot in Marnie where she's about to shoot her horse, and it's an insert. And it's her hand with a gun, and the camera is on her shoulder, and it's running. I've done this in practically every picture. I'll never get it right because Hitchcock did it, but it's so much fun to do. Never get it right? If you say so, Marty. It's funny, this shot does look very specifically like a Scorsese shot, but I couldn't find that many examples. But I found this shot in Gangs of New York where I can see how he's trying to use that same approach to different effects.
I guess the only thing I can try to answer is that there's been a kind of struggle between maybe 3 different styles or something. It's almost like a kind of American-European, one group pulling me, the other group pulling me, and sometimes I'll say, no, this is going to be flat, it's going to be straight, and I can't help moving the camera a little bit. Watching Naruse or watching Close Up by Kiarostami. Have you seen that one?
Yes.
Yeah. That, for me, refocused my whole way of thinking, watching this film Close Up. You must see this thing. It's on DVD, Kiarostami, Iranian film. And so I find myself not watching modern films as much as possible. Again, older stuff. And if I'm looking at more modern films, they're usually independent or they're usually Southeast Asian or Iranian. And style for me, when you say style, I think of like some of Visconti or Incenso or particularly The Leopard or Minnelli's camera moves. crane moves and that sort of thing. And there's been that struggle back and forth, the simplicity or the complexity.
A final note on the original source concept, the most fun part of this is climbing down the tree to find the roots of the influence. A perfect example of this is on Edgar Wright's commentary track on Hot Fuzz.
And Scorsese, obviously, he's the granddaddy of it. Some interviewer once asked me, said, oh, did you steal all your montages from Snatch? And I said, no, I stole them from Martin Scorsese like Guy Ritchie did.
When Edgar says that, the first time I was watching Hot Fuzz with the commentary, I didn't know. Climb down the tree, find the roots. Okay, let's keep going. William Friedkin spent the first few years of the 1970s making two of the most significant American films of the decade, with The French Connection in 71 and The Exorcist in 73. When The Exorcist hit cinemas in December of 73, a cosmic shift tore its way through the culture.
David Sheehan is with us tonight to talk about a movie that has people passing out in the lobby on their way in or on their way out, David.
Well, you've heard about all those reports about The Exorcist and the trouble it's causing, people fainting and so forth.
I don't know, it doesn't bother me that much. But I guess it bothered her more than it bothered me.
Friedkin's realism and slow-burning storytelling and taking a supernatural story and rooting it in a hyper-real way left audiences questioning what they just watched. Thinking about audience reaction like this is a powerful tool for movie watching. Cultural context. Cultural context puts you in the minds of the original audience and you can view it through their eyes. Mix this with career context and you've hit the movie watching jackpot. Yeah, what a great time to make movies. Now adding on top of that, here's a better question. What do you make after your masterpiece? What do you make when your director cachet is overflowing? Now we're getting into the good stuff. You're locked into a director's career. You know what audience experience while they watch their last film. And now the director is essentially given a blank check to make whatever passion project they want. And in the case of William Friedkin, that movie was Sorcerer. Sorcerer sits among the most ambitious, brash, and uncompromising films made in the 1970s. A film whose production was described as life-threatening and too dangerous to insure. It also contains the first ever Tangerine Dream original score that essentially paved the way for soundtracks of the 1980s. Sorcerer was released in 1977, but came out mere weeks after Star Wars. It crashed and burned.
You know, Gene, I still can't believe that the epic adventure Sorcerer was so completely overlooked. The jungle scenes, the rain and flood, the fire and catastrophe are among the most exciting movie scenes I've ever seen, but for some reason, the studio opened this movie with a lousy advertising campaign at the last minute. They had no faith in the picture's future. They pulled it out of the lousy theaters they got it into after a few weeks. Sorcerer certainly qualifies as one of the great lost films of the 1970s.
Some 25 years after its release, a now long forgotten film, Friedkin had to file a lawsuit to regain ownership of the film. He then oversaw its digital restoration, and the film played at the Venice Film Festival in 2013. And that following year was released on Blu-ray, where it shot to #1 in action adventure on Amazon. It is now almost universally lauded as an overlooked masterpiece and the last undeclared one of the 1970s.
It plays now everywhere. Why? I don't know. Well, different audience, different critics, different film historians, and a new zeitgeist than when it came out.
All this is to say that my personal viewings of Friedkin's 3 consecutive 1970s masterpieces are wrapped up in so much exciting film lore that the viewing experience becomes downright tangible. Okay, I'm ready. Another memorable 1970s viewing experience was discovering Alan Pakula's unofficial Paranoia trilogy. This is 71's Klute, 74's The Parallax View, and finally 1976's All the President's Men. I had seen All the President's Men based on its reputation for being the quintessential film about journalism. Follows the investigation of Woodward and Bernstein in the aftermath of the Watergate break-in that led to the resignation. But what I didn't realize is that it was directed by perhaps the most unrecognized director of the new Hollywood movement, Alan J. Pakula.
Hello.
Well,
Pakula made 2 other movies about 70s paranoia before President's Men, and they're considered a trilogy? This is what you want.
What I would really like to do is be faceless and bodiless and be left alone.
Hello. Who are you?
Just follow the money.
So this unofficial paranoia trilogy, Klute, Parallax View, President's Men, they're all infused with the same general paranoia that marked the 70s in the United States. They share a sense of mood and theme rather than a serialized story.
There is a magic when you stand behind the camera and you see life take place on screen. You know you can guide the actors into the right areas of work, and you can stop them when they go into the wrong areas. But finally, when life takes over, that's the magic. And most wonderful thing about films to me is being able to tell something through the eyes of a character.
Another vital piece of information that dramatically enhanced my viewing experience was finding out Gordon Willis was the cinematographer for all 3 films.
Alan Pakula's cameraman on this movie is Gordon Willis.
I started the film saying to Gordy, we're doing a film about people in a closed-in, locked-in world. In most cases, he had as much of an idea of what I planned to do with the story and the film as I did. Within that, we'd both improvise. Very often I'd say, I'd like to do this. He'd say, I know what you're reaching for, but I think we can do it in a different way.
I just simply pictured things a different way. And in some cases it caused a ruckus now and then, because it's like saying, well, we can't do that because that's never been done before. Well, I never did it in that spirit. I just simply did it because I liked it.
Willis had the remarkable and unrivaled ability to transform everyday physical spaces into sinister dens of conspiracy. Not only that, the trilogy is part of Willis's monumental run of groundbreaking work. In the span of 8 years, starting in 1971, Willis directed photography on Klute, The Godfather, Bad Company, The Paper Chase, The Parallax View, The Godfather Part 2, All the President's Men, Annie Hall Interiors, and Manhattan in 1979. This is arguably the most influential run of films on modern cinematography. When I watch these movies, this is what I'm thinking about. I'm also trying to make connections to what modern films have the same cinematic looks. Willis died in May of 2014. In a retrospective by The Hollywood Reporter, friend of Willis and fellow cinematographer Owen Roizman said this of Willis: "I had the good fortune of meeting Gordon and working with him every day for 1 year while I was an assistant cameraman in the early 1960s. I learned many things from Gordon, both professionally and personally. All cinematographers owe him a great debt of gratitude for his teaching us to overcome our fears and be willing to take chances. He was a true pioneer. He truly shot from his heart and tossed aside any accepted rules." Do you know what films Roizman would go on to shoot in the 1970s? The French Connection and The Exorcist. So these examples, Scorsese, Friedkin, Pakula, Willis, and looking into influences, cultural context surrounding a release, the team behind a film, this all adds depth and weight to the experience of watching movies, and for me, are all ways to help feel more connected to what I choose to watch. In the third and final part of this series, I will examine how our perception of a film can change over time and conclude by attempting to answer why this all matters to me. See you then.